Hello, NOSA community. I am finally back, and I'm excited to be back on this Friday evening to talk again about virtual assistant. Thanks for those who have watched our series. If you haven't, you can check it out in the playlist, or you can check it out here by just searching um, through the various videos. I believe it's at the top of the list. As always, thanks for being a part of our NOSA community, and I'm excited to be here again on YouTube to talk to you guys about a topic that actually jumped into our YouTube Facebook group and our YouTube channel as of recently, so the timing was perfection. So hopefully from the session and the other two videos as a part of this series, you got the opportunity to get some more information about the process, get some insight from someone who's done it, the good, the bad, the ugly, and at our final part of the series, how to fire your VA or virtual assistant. You'll get some insight as to what to do and what not to do. So as always, my name is Shamika, the founder and creator of the NOSA group. And today we are finalizing our three-part series today on how to fire your virtual assistant. And of course, I know you guys saw the topic and thought we were actually going to talk about it, but we're going to touch on it and actually talk about ways to avoid getting to the point that you have to fire your assistant. But as we all know, as business owners, NOSAs, or other healthcare professional business owners, there comes a time when you may have to terminate a relationship. So this isn't a bad topic as much as it's something that you just kind of have to get used to as a part of what we do as entrepreneurs. And kind of once you do it, you kind of have your own little process of handling it. And then once you get big enough, you have other people handle it for you. So feel free to jump in. Feel free to let us know where you're from. Share the video with a friend or two, and let's get started. So again, I've talked on the other two parts of the series around kind of determining, hey, am I ready to have a VA? Am I ready to add to my organization where we are in the process? So for some of us, it may be that I'm in the beginning stages and I've been in business for a year or two, or it could be that we're growing, and that might be the reason that you need more staff supporting you in your business. Some things to think about prior to doing that is doing kind of the pre-work. So the first series talked about, or first video talked about the pre-work that you need to do. So you need to do some of these things that we're talking about here. And the reason I touched on it is because it's really important, is you need to create a job description. And one of the reasons is that's important is because that's kind of the groundwork. So creating the job description kind of says, hey, these are the tasks, these are the things that myself or other team members are doing that I feel like another individual could do successfully, virtually, with little to no supervision to help our organization move forward. So creating a job description talks about the education and background you want the person to have, and then it also touches on the tasks and the duties they'll be doing on a day-to-day basis, and any special skills that you want them to have, systems, experience, to kind of create a well-rounded role, as well as any education. So if you wanted them to have like a bachelor's degree or some sort of degree in IT or anything like that. So that's important as the foundation. One thing that I would do, and it's so funny because they talked about it again at a training I was in earlier today, is sit down with yourself. This weekend is a good weekend. And really determine the things that you're doing. Sometimes as business owners, we do everything. And sometimes before we were business owners, we were doing everything as well. So you really want to sit down and determine what are the tasks that I'm doing that are things that I could pass on to somebody else. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Some of the things that we've had at our community, within our community and in our business would include making calls to candidates. That's something you could pass on to somebody. You give them a nice script. You kind of create templates or create next steps for them and reaching out to potential candidates. So that's something definitely that NOSAs can pass on to others. Even if there's somebody who's experienced, that person can also be the person that actually facilitates the interviews. The next thing is scheduling. So scheduling is a big part of what we do, even though quite a few of us have technology in place, scheduling, having someone manage the schedules, make sure people are where they're supposed to be, manage the app if you're using an app or any sort of technology for that is something that typically is passed off to a virtual assistant or virtual assistant type. Some other things would include compliance, maybe the submitting of paperwork, coordinating drug screening backgrounds, social media, administrative email management, calendar management. Those are all things that you would typically see NOSAs have their virtual assistants do, amongst other things. As I mentioned in the first video, virtual assistants can do bookkeeping, they can do marketing, they can do business development, real estate. So they have a wealth of areas that they typically operate in. But I was just sharing a couple examples. So with that being said, a couple of places that I wouldn't put a virtual assistant. And part of it is it's kind of the forward-facing roles that are your money makers. That would be your business development. That's not something that I would outsource to virtual assistants. If you've been in business for less than 3 to 5 years, I wouldn't outsource sales and marketing. That's something your core people need to be doing. Same thing with accounting. Some functions of accounting can be outsourced, but the main piece as far as like payroll processing, until you kind of get a groove and are able to manage it well and have systems in place, I wouldn't outsource payroll either. So those are some of the things that you want to think about, some of the clinical roles, some of the clinical expectations, training and things like that that are more healthcare specific. I wouldn't outsource those things either. So those are just a few things that I would and wouldn't do to think about when you're developing your job description. I also tell people don't overdo it. There's plenty of job descriptions out there. Sometimes your companies you're working with might help you with developing them. So consider that. Next thing is once you kind of determine what you want them to do, you create it in a job description, you want to think about how you can fit it in your budget. So you want to do some research on the costs. So VAs can range from, I think I've seen as low as $10 an hour all the way up to $40, $50 an hour. And a lot of that's based on what you want them to do, but it's also based on where they're located. So take that into consideration when you're thinking about your budget, especially if it's something you're thinking to do in 2023. Finally, go out there into the market, see who's out there, ask for referrals, find out from other NOSAs or companies who provide the service. So do a great shopping of different companies. Don't stick with the first one because they sold you on it. Do a couple of different companies, do compare and contrast. Find out if they have any sort of contract limitations, or if you wanted to cancel, you can cancel without any complications. You want to also think about if there's any minimum, so you may have to have somebody on 40 hours a week, maybe you only want to do 20. So you want to think about all of that, as well as any background of the individuals working for that company, any in-house training that those companies do. And then finally, you always want to think about referrals. So referrals are big in our community. I encourage people to use them. That's a great way to get another person who's in the same industry or business as you experience with that particular company without any with clear outcomes. So hey, this person's worked with me for 3 years, they're doing these particular tasks, and I've had these types of areas where it was good and some areas in challenge, and this has been my experience with the business. So you kind of have a clear expectation of what the business can and cannot do. And then you want to set your own expectations. So in bringing somebody on board, and after you've interviewed them and gotten a chance to talk to a couple of different companies and candidates, you want to think about, hey, what do I want this job to do? And what does someone in this job being successful at it look like? So that's what I talk about when I say setting expectations. An example would be when we've hired recruiters and we were a part of a vendor management system, one of our expectations was that recruiter get at minimum 5 individuals uploaded, compliance, move through drug screens, resumes, background references within a 5 to 7 day time frame. So from the time that the candidate, was interested and began the process of submitting documents, that person was a go, is what we refer to it as, in the system to begin to either pick up shifts or pick up contracts. So we kind of put that around the parameter of 5 to 7 business days. So that's an expectation. You can have an expectation on the number of calls or how many posts if they're doing social media, or how quickly reports get out, or if they're doing any sort of monthly reporting or anything like that. So those are just some ways you can set expectations. You can set expectations around performance, communication, reporting, timelines, projects. Those are all areas you can do that in. And then the next one is evaluating performance. So you set the expectation, kind of understand what success looks like in that role to be able to evaluate their performance. And I encourage people to not only evaluate performance once in a while or once every 90 days, do it on a regular basis. Do check-ins with the company that they're working with to kind of say, hey, they're working out. We really like to ... You want to make sure that you're communicating with them how they're feeling about the role, any changes or improvements that they may want to share with you. And that kind of goes into the area of, once you've done all that, and a lot of this is done before the person starts working, if you've done all of those things and you run into bumps in the road, as we all do, then you want to go here. And here is kind of like the middle of the road. Maybe they've been working with you 3 months, 90 days, 120 days, 30 days sometimes, and you're starting to see some performance-related problems. At that point, you want to, of course, do a quick check-in or performance evaluation with them. And then you want to kind of determine, one, is it a them thing or is it a me thing? And that's important because many times it's not so much that they're unable to do the job, it's just that they're unable. And here are some of the areas that they may be causes why they're unable to do the job. Maybe they weren't provided adequate training. So what I've told people is, throughout the pandemic, even in my own experience, training virtually, depending on the topic, can be challenging. So that's definitely one of the questions I would ask a VA during an interview. How comfortable are you trained? Are you with learning, training virtually? What type of a learner are you? And based on their answers, you want to kind of cue your information that you share with them like that. So if they're visual learners, maybe you'll do something like what we're doing here. If they're learners that learn through writing, you want to kind of maybe take something like this and put it in a PowerPoint or a PDF that you share with them, and then y'all discuss it later. If they're auditory, you can do a format like this as well. So you want to make sure that you've eliminated as many barriers as the owner for things like this. So you want to make sure that you've provided adequate training. And when you provide training, it's based on how the person receives it. So if you're training on a new project or topic, or even kind of baseline training, which is kind of talking about what our industry does, you want them to be able to communicate that back to you. So what is healthcare staffing? If your virtual assistant doesn't understand and can't clearly communicate that to you, then they haven't gotten the adequate training. And it's an opportunity for you to maybe consider training or presenting the information to them differently. Number 2, you want to make sure that you've created open doors of communication. So some of the ways that I've done that, and I encourage you guys to do it, is through weekly check-ins. I do mine on Monday, but kind of how we worked, and I've kind of incorporated into the schedule, is that on Sundays, or at least by Sunday, I've submitted to my VA the priorities for the week. And we do it via Trello. And from there, on Monday in the afternoon when we meet, she's had enough time to look over that information, ask questions, because our meetings are in the afternoon, get some clarification, look some stuff up, so that by Monday, she can ask any more in-depth questions, as well as I can fill in any blanks. I can say, hey, that'll be attached to this email that I'm sending to you, or this file that I've attached here. So creating the doors of communication also looks like offering more than one way for your VA to communicate with me. So my VA can email me, which is the primary way that we communicate, but um, she can also text me, she can Google message me, or she can communicate via um, the Trello boards, which is kind of like a project management system. So she can communicate via there. So as a small business owner, many times we're busy. We don't always have time to reach out or always be available. Our phones are always ringing, but you want to make sure that you've not only allotted the time for your VA to talk to you, but also given her or him many avenues to connect with you. The last part, and this kind of ties into where we were talking about setting expectations, is around identifying the ideal candidate. So as a business owner, it's important that you have identified your ideal candidate so that you know what success looks like in that role. And sometimes as NOSAs, we can't always do that because we're still new to the business ourselves. But you want to take out the time to really think through what that is so that when someone's on track, you kind of know about it. You kind of know, okay, so, they're hitting these different milestones, they're doing these different things, and they're meeting the requirements of the job and or doing the job effectively. So also you want to so the next thing that you want to think about is, if you've done that, you kind of done step one and you've done step two, step one here, the very early on process, and then you've also done step two. If you continue to have challenges around the performance and expectations for that particular person in that role, then you want to do what some people refer to as a PIP, or performance improvement evaluation, and essentially provide them opportunities and time to improve. So once you kind of reach this middle road and you're making sure, hey, the problem isn't me, I've covered all these bases, I've made sure that they not only know what they need to do, they've been trained on it, they know how to come and connect with me if they have any questions, and then I'm clear as to what success looks like in that role. You want to give them a little bit of time. So you want to take into consideration that with change, people need time. So if during that time you continue to not see any improvements and or attempts at improvements, I encourage you guys to do this. And this is a little bit different than what most people would say about these types of situations. Within the first 90 days, I think you already know and you can be clear as to whether or not that person is a good fit for your organization. But many times during interviews or just during the process of bringing a person on, we can think about, oh, they're great, they get in the role, and then they end up somewhere around here where it's like, oh, they're just not performing to my standards. But in actuality, the issue is here. Number two, the person isn't a good fit for that job. So I encourage people not to second guess themselves when it comes to, hey, I talked to them over the phone, they sound so good, they have these different types of backgrounds and skills, and they're not a good fit, and kind of begin the process of firing them or eliminating the relationship, versus evaluate other opportunities where you can use your employees or where your employees can succeed. And what that does, especially for small business owners, it allows you to not start over again. So the process of starting over again can be extremely tedious and time consuming, and it can touch into resources where you may have to take on a role that you'd step back from, which was part of the reason of hiring the VA. But instead of going to the extreme, I'm going to say, and sometimes it's a necessary extreme, but instead of going in that direction, you really want to think about, hey, there were certain skills and qualities or knowledge base or interactions that I had with this person during the interview process or during the time that they've been on our team, but I don't think that they're a good fit for this. Is there anything else in our organization that might be a better fit for them? And what that does is, one, allows a person, especially if there's someone that's trying, it's just not a good role, to see that you actually are vested in their interests in their future. It also allows you to not go through the process of having to, one, fire them and start over again, but also that person can take those skills and talents and abilities and use them in other ways in your organization and still kind of understand the core and your vision and your mission of your organization as well. So prior to getting to our last two steps, I really encourage you to try that, because many times that's the bigger issue, is that they're not a good fit for that opportunity. It could be that they're not a good compliance person, but they're better at a recruiting role, something like that. It could be also maybe they're not good at marketing, but they're better at social media. So those are all other areas where people can kind of, one, be cross-trained into, as well as, areas where people may be better fits. So the last thing is, before doing that, if with all of that and time's passed and you're still in a place where you're interested in letting the person go or fire them, think about what they do. So before you fire them or let them go, you really want to make sure that your VA is documenting their tasks, their roles, the steps they take to do things. Because at the point that you let someone go, you don't want to be placed in a situation where you have to start from zero with the next person that you bring on board. So you want to always have them write. They're the best person to write your SOPs because they're essentially more or less doing the job. Of course, it's something that I would encourage you to review later and make sure that it's what you want that role to continue to do, but you don't want to have yourself in a situation where you're starting from zero. So prior to kind of having the conversation with the company, here, number 3, where you ask for a little bit of feedback from the company employee, I would encourage you to have them a couple of weeks before, their time is up, start doing some of those types of tasks as a part of their day-to-day activities. And then finally, once you've decided to let them go, I'm a person with virtual assistants. I do let them know what's going to happen. But I do also communicate with the company, and many times the company will let you do it, they might do it, or some variation of that, so that there's no surprises. You don't want to kind of burn any bridges or anything like that. You want to make sure that, hey, it's not a good fit. Don't have to necessarily give full explanations, but you do want to be respectful. I've enjoyed your time. I appreciate you working and your contributions to our organization. And then, I say ask for feedback. I think it may be dependent on the circumstances, whether or not a person would do it, but I would ask for feedback because there's always room for improvement. Hey, we started this journey in our respective businesses however long ago, but you're still always learning. I love to learn. So if there's something I could do better, I'd rather have someone tell me than to continue to make the mistake and learn the hard way. And then once the company has removed the employee, if you give them enough time, many times they'll work towards getting a replacement so that'll limit your lag time. But if not, you would definitely want to get some feedback from the company about, what you can do differently or what you're looking for that might be different, especially in this area of identifying the ideal candidate so that you don't have to go through this process again. And like I mentioned before, I know you guys thought I was going to tell you how to fire them and write them up and do all these different things. But as a small business owner, that takes time, money, and effort. So that's why this particular presentation is more geared towards, hey, how can we fix this versus ending the relationship? Because not every relationship requires that it end every business relationship, as much as it just needs to be tweaked a little bit. Maybe they're more fit in this area or more fit with this team. Trying to fix it is way more cost effective and way more beneficial to you in the long term than each time that you've reached a hurdle or you come into a situation where there's problems that you terminate those business relationships. So I hope this helped you guys and gave you a little bit of tips and insight on that process. I myself have had to do it, so I'm definitely not speaking without having my own experiences. And it's not always a bad thing. It could be, and for the most recent instance where I did do it, it was based on the fact that our organization was going in a different direction. And just with anything else in life, not everybody can go on that journey. And I just needed a more high level expert, specialized individual in that role. So make sure, guys, check out the other two part of the series around getting started with working with virtual assistants. Make sure you do your research. Check out referrals. We have a link below if you're interested in any of the referrals for the company that I'm working with. Really consider getting referrals, not only a referral to the company, but talk to the people. So if you have questions for me about my experience, feel free to leave it in the comment box below. But also, if you want to reach out directly and kind of discuss things, you can do that as well. As always, thanks NOSA community for keeping me accountable and hanging out with me this Friday evening. I hope you enjoyed the video. We'll be doing another series next week, probably next Tuesday, on SMART goals, which is another fun topic that I love to talk about. So enjoy your evening, and I'll be chatting with you.